Hey everybody and welcome to the Sim channel. My name is Leon and today we're going to talk about a DIY clutch mod for the Thrustmaster T3PA-Pro pedals. So I modded my own set of pedals based loosely off of a YouTube clip that I found which didn't really explain anything at all. So it took me quite some time to figure out exactly what parts I need and how to assemble the whole thing. In the end though, I'm quite pleased with the results and that's why I'm sharing it with you. So why did I do this? The T3PA-Pro pedals are invertible, which means the throttle and the clutch are essentially the same pedal, which means they're both linear and they have very low resistance. In a real car, however, the clutch has a clear pressure point with a fall off beyond that, and I just wanted to get that same clutch feeling also to my clutch pedal in the sim rig. So for the planning stage, I mostly used two different tools. The first one being Photoshop and a technical drawing of the pedals, and the second one being a little Python script. So the technical drawing that I used is based off of what I think is an official Thrustmaster image of a side view of the pedals, and I just redid the whole thing in a higher resolution to be able to precisely measure what length of parts I would need for the pedals and for the mod. So as for the script, I'm afraid I may have gotten the math a little wrong. The pedals didn't end up feeling like you would expect from looking at the plots which were generated from the script. So if anybody out there is good at math and or has a background in maybe mechanical engineering, please reach out to me and maybe we can work it out together. Alright, with that out of the way, let's move on to parts and construction. So first off, I wanted to make sure that everything is sturdy and rigid and nothing flexes and so on. And so I used 3 of these large 16 centimeter L pieces with pre-drilled 6mm holes, and I mounted them inside the pedal base. For this I had to drill 2 holes on each side into the pedal base, 6mm diameter or slightly above it to fit the screws. I then put the L pieces inside the pedal base, and I used nuts and washers as spacers to be able to tighten it all up very neatly so that nothing would ever move. So what I didn't do but should have done is to cut the L pieces at the indicated red lines before putting it all together. So I highly recommend you do that and not put it together and then try cutting around the L pieces. So on the pedal side of things, I used a U-profile to harbor the first axis. The U-profile is, I think, 2.5 by 2.5 centimeters, and the steel is about 1.5 millimeters or 2 millimeters thick. The whole piece is like 6 centimeters in length. To mount the U-profile to the pedal, I took advantage of the threads that are already in the pedal. So there are 4 threads, 2 of which are used by the pedal plate, and they're used to mount the pedal plate to the pedal, and the other 2 I used to mount the U-profile to the pedal on the other side. Coming now to the long arm, which connects the first axis to the second axis. The arm consists of 2 fork heads on either side and a 6 centimeter threaded rod in between. The rod is actually covered in my case with a connecting nut and 2 regular nuts. I'm actually using 2 of these arms to avoid flex, and all of the parts are M6. The short arms connecting axis 2 and 3 are self-made because I couldn't find anything that would do the job in the hardware store. So I got a long metal bar or steel bar, 4 millimeters thick, and I cut 2 pieces of 5 centimeter length off of it, and per piece drilled 2 holes in it, 6 millimeter diameter, and I think 3.4 centimeters apart. So the 3 axes themselves are M6 screws, where the first, I think like 42 or so millimeters are unthreaded. I put in a lot of washers between the fork heads and the short arms and so on in order to reduce the slackness, and I used mostly plastic washers in order to keep the noise to a minimum. Now, with the L pieces, the short arms, the long arms, the U-profile and the axis covered, what remains is the most crucial part, which would be the springs. And the springs may be a little difficult to obtain. Alongside the fork heads, they were the only part of the whole mod that I couldn't get in the local hardware store and instead had to get off the internet. I got mine off of eBay and the offer didn't indicate any spring rate, so I had to measure the spring rate myself using some weights that I had lying around. I measured it in at 0.56 Newton per millimeter, which could be off to either side. It's not a very precise measurement. Anyway, I would suggest if you go for a model like this, you take springs that are a little stronger than that, maybe 0.7 to 0.9 Newton per millimeter. In terms of length, my spring measures in at 132 millimeters, mounting point to mounting point in relaxed state. Since this is a little on the low side, I used a hole ribbon to extend the spring length to reach the holes pre-drilled and pre-threaded in the pedal base in a rather relaxed state. Finally, I had to make some adjustments to the black base plate of the pedals, as you can see indicated in this image. Alright, this concludes the parts and construction part of this video. If you have any questions left and you can't find an answer in the pictures provided in the video and in the description, please just let me know in the comments and I will get back to you. We now move on to how this clutch actually feels and how it does on the track. So first off, this is a very good improvement over the stock clutch pedals in the T3PA-Pro. The required force to push the pedal down is larger than before, and there is a pressure point beyond which it gets a little easier to push it further. However, as I noted earlier, the feeling doesn't exactly match the calculations from the script. The initial force necessary to move the pedal at all is a little larger than expected, and the pressure point isn't as clearly defined as I'd hoped it would be. So overall, it doesn't feel exactly like a real clutch, but it's still a dramatic improvement to the unmodded pedal. Alright, let's get to the conclusion. So first of all, what did this mod cost? With the springs and fork heads being rather expensive, the parts alone came in at about 40 to 50 euros. Additionally, you may have some cost in tools. For example, you may wear down a drill or two, or wear down some of those sawing plates for the Dremel if you choose to use that for cutting. So let's talk pros and cons. First, the pros. I think it looks really cool, and it's a good improvement over the stock clutch pedal. And it's a DIY project, so that means it can be a lot of fun if you're into that kind of thing. To the cons. First off, you're probably voiding a warranty doing this. Second, you might slash the resale value of the pedals. Third, you can no longer invert the pedal, so you will be stuck with a formula mode and can no longer go to the GT mode pedals anymore. The footprint of the pedals is increased, and that may result in some issues mounting them to your rig. As for my rig, the GT Omega Pro, there was no issue whatsoever. The foot plate is big enough and I could easily mount them even with the mod installed. If you're pushing the pedals against a wall, so you're not in a rig but you're pushing them, having them flat on the ground, pushing them against the wall, you now no longer have a flat rear plate of the pedals, so you might put something like a big book or so in between to have a flat surface to push against. Next up, this is a lot of work. I didn't expect it to be so much, but I spent definitely more than a day or two working on this with all the planning and shopping parts and doing some metal work and installing it, and then going through iteration and buying more parts and iterations. And yeah, it was a mess, really. It took me much longer than expected. Anyway, I have it done now and I'm happy with it. Last con, it's not really that cheap. So with me spending around, let's say, 50 bucks just for the parts, and personally I spent a little more because I got more parts than I ended up using. Plus the cost in tools. As I said, I went through a couple of drills and a couple of those Dremel plates. It wasn't really cheap, and for me it was only worth it because I already had the pedals and I wanted to try this out in order to see if I can get a little more lifetime out of my pedals before I opt for something much better. If you have those pedals, then putting those 50, 60, maybe 70 euros with tools into it might absolutely be worth it if your next step up are, say, Club Sport pedals for 370 euros or so. If you're just In the market for pedals though, and you're looking at the T3PA-Pro, for I think they come in at around 170 euros, and you're looking at them plus a possible clutch mod as an alternative to the Fanatic pedals, I would say it might not be worth it, because you'll end up spending around 220 to 230 euros, I suppose, in total, including the clutch mod, and then you're not that far off of the price for the Club Sport pedals anymore. So in that case, I would suggest to go for the pricier but more professional solution. Alright, so with this being said, the video is coming to an end. If you enjoyed it, please leave a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. That's it for now. Take care and goodbye.